Welcome to everyone who is listening. As Live Jazz KC presents a conversation with Peter Bernstein. Thank you for joining us. And a special welcome to our guest, world renowned jazz guitarist, composer, educator, band leader, shaman, Peter Bernstein.
Thank you so much, Ken. Brian, thanks. It's great to be here. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks for joining us and sharing your wisdom. Um, Peter's a big musical hero of mine and the musicians I work with. We're all big fans. And one of our main colleagues over the last 15 years is guitarist Brian Baggett. And we spent a fair amount of time playing Peter's compositions and in particular the work he's done with his trio with organist Larry Goldings and drummer Bill Stewart. And Brian's here to help with the interview. So he'll bring some guitar experience and focus to the interview side of things. So welcome, Brian.
Thanks. Good to be here. Thanks, guys.
Peter, just wanted to say thanks for joining us. And before we kind of get into it, is there anything that's on your mind right now you want to jump into?
On my mind, well, I think there's so much on everyone's mind just these days in terms of our world being, kind of overturned. I mean, jazz music or, small group music, improvised music is the opposite of social distancing. We need to be together and be close and feel the audience close, and it's just like we're not fitting into the world right now, so we have to just kind of be on the sidelines and wait, so to be able to really do what we do. And so all the things that maybe we might have taken for granted about the experience of playing with people is I'm sure on everyone's mind, because we can't do it. And just the idea of playing with people is becoming a thing that we're all just like waiting to do. So that's what's been on my mind just in general. I mean, just a couple of days ago, we lost the great Jimmy Cobb, so that interrupted that general mind flow, and as much as I try to be ready for this eventuality, and being 91 years old and all that, I still wasn't ready for it. So it hit me pretty hard, and just, mixed with celebrating a great life and really just feeling so fortunate to have gotten to play with him. It's still sadness of just like, well, never hear that sound again, never hear that stick on the cymbal in that way coming from that person, because that's only he did that. And but it's just a lesson, especially now that we can't really play, about what it means to have a musical identity and to make a mark, and to just through sonic expression and manipulating, vibrations and stuff like that, playing an instrument, we can really impact people and express ourselves. So it's just like when someone like that goes, it was such a presence that you just feel the intensity of what we're all trying to do, which is express ourselves through music. But the social aspect of playing jazz is so important, so we're all cut off from that, and it's just it's that kind of time. That's where you have to go inside and reflect, because there's no seeing, there's no hang, there's no interacting. So, but of course, Jimmy's on my mind first and foremost. Just everything that he did, and just the beauty he played with, the intensity, the empathy, and generosity. Anyway, I could keep going, but that's what.
Well, he was on your first record, right, back in whatever '94, the Something's Burning.
I had got a chance to make up my own record for Crisscross. I had been on a couple of Sideman dates, and Jerry Teekins was nice enough to give me my own date. And around that time, I started to play. Well, a little before, I had met Jimmy Cobb at the New School in '88, '89, and we started doing some gigs, around '90. He got some gigs, and then he said, "If you guys get some gigs, I'll make it." So we used to get some weeks at the Village Gate on the terrace part. Not the terrace. It's called the terrace. It was the street level of the Village Gate. They had the top of the gate was upstairs, and then the famous room that was kind of one flight down. But we played weeks, Tuesday through Sunday, 2 sets a night, maybe 3 on the weekend.
Nice.
On the terrace, and that was the first time I ever got to play a week, and it was me, Brad Meldau, John Weber, great bassist, and we got a whole week, and I'm sure we gave Jimmy everything we could give him, and took a little bread for ourselves. But he made a week with us, and that was just the first experience of just like playing on a very intense level every night in the same place, and just he was right there. So when I got a chance to make my own date, that was like the group I felt most comfortable. We played a few of my tunes, and well, I was very green. We were all pretty green, but except for Cobb, of course, it was just playing and just like, this is how I've always done it. Let's go, guys. Get with this. And it was. I mean, amazing. Brad was playing on such a high level already. He was 24, something like that. John Weber always hooked up great with Jimmy Cobb, and he was always up for playing with us, and God bless him for that, among many other things.
And then, but you guys have kept playing together until, till recent times. I mean, when you came to Kansas City, you played a Folly Theater date with him.
It was about 10 years ago or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
He got some. Yeah, he would get some gigs. I remember Randy Brecker was a guest with us on that concert, and that was with Richard Wyans on piano. And I remember we did a lot of gigs, a couple of records with Richard Wyans, great pianist, even older than Cobb actually, and he just passed away middle of last year. Yeah, I mean, me and Weber, we were just talking the other day, and just said we got to play with Jimmy for so many years, with so many great piano players, and he always kind of kept it going.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And we're gonna play a track just from last November, so a pretty recent thing. We're gonna check out in a little bit. Let me get Brian in on this and ask one for the guitar players or whatever you want to ask. I don't want to pigeonhole you.
Sure. Well, first of all, Peter, it's really good to meet you, man, and I'm a huge fan of yours. And also, Ken is a guy that turned me on to your playing nearly 20 years ago. So it's really good to be here. And thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So my first question is about your guitar. You seem to favor one guitar that you play. Can you tell me a little bit about the guitar and the history of it, and maybe your relationship with it, and
Sure.
what makes it right for Peter Bernstein?
Well, I was lucky to get this guitar in 1998, so a little over 20 years ago now. And it's a guitar made by a luthier who was from Philadelphia named John Zeidler. He passed away, I think, 2002, a long time ago now. He was quite young, but he made a lot of beautiful guitars. This guitar was made in 1988. It was actually one of the first arch tops that he made. And he was a real purist. Like, he never made an electric guitar. He never made a guitar where they cut the hole for the pickup. And he didn't do, like, he was just like a luthier. He wanted to make an acoustic instrument. He made mandolins. I think he might have made violins. He was kind of a wizard and a beautiful guy. And he made this guitar. And I had met him through a friend of mine, great guitarist, Steve Berger, who was a friend of Zeidler's. And he said, you got to meet this guy, and he should build you a guitar one day. So I'd actually gone down to meet him. And then like 6 months later, I got a call from Steve who said, a friend of mine has an old Zeidler, and it was, I guess at that time it was 17 years old, but it wasn't one of the guitars that he had been made recently. And you should go check it out. So I checked it out, and it was this guitar. It was like dark brown finish, looked kind of like a bass, that kind of color wood, and just looked different than anything I'd ever seen. And the sound was just like another level of overtones that it produced. And I was playing, Gibsons before that. I had an L5, which was a nice guitar, but this was just on another level of response. And it kind of, I realized right away, like, this guitar is it's got to make me play better, because it's so sensitive and has so much richness and just a range of sound that it's like, control this. So I remember, like, kind of hearing piano players talk about playing on different axes, which they have to do different ones every night if they happen to be on the road, of course. And just like certain pianos, like you get on a piano that's really big, and it's just like a lot of sound to control, and it's intimidating. And I said, that's exactly how I feel about the guitar. It's like, I really have to touch it right, because whatever indecision or, hesitancy I'm feeling also projects very clearly. So it's like really, an instrument that makes you play to its level. So I'm just lucky to have it, and unusual in that most guitar players have lots of different axes and switch and go back and forth. And I've just been playing the same guitar for 22 years now. So I'm not a big gadget person. I just like this instrument. Every time I go to play it, it's challenging me to find the sweet spot, you know, and so.
Very cool. Yeah, well, that kind of leads me to my next question, because your touch on the guitar is so nice, and then the kind of singing tone that you get out of the guitar. I'm sure it has something to do with the guitar, but it has something to do with you too. And I was just curious, like, what inspired you, or what you did to kind of develop that aspect of your sound?
Well, thanks. I mean, a lot has to do with the guitar in terms of the sustain of the instrument and the sensitivity and response, as I said. But in terms of my own approach, I was lucky to hear a lot of great horn players, and I've always listened. As soon as I got into jazz, which was through the guitar players, of course, I was digging the horn players too, and really got into the, you know, people with beautiful sounds and just the horn aesthetic of breathing and singing, you know, using air to make the sound. So guitar, you know, or piano, you just pluck it, you know, there's no air involved. So I really listened to horn players and singers a lot and really tried to get a singing sound and imagine air, you know, moving through to produce a vibration, you know. And I was lucky to see great guitar players that had great big sounds, like Jim Hall up close, and Kenny Burrell, and so many, you know, everyone plays the guitar in a different way, and it's just amazing to see guys produce a sound out of it in different ways, all the different personalities, you know, Schofield and Bill Frisell, people I was getting to see it live a lot, and just everybody. I was just learning from everybody, but I always loved the horn players, so that's what I'm going for, the sound that has that, you know, projection.
Nice. Yeah, it's working for sure.
Working on it.
Next question is about composition. You write some great tunes, and one of my favorite tunes of yours is Metamorphosis. And I was curious if you could maybe give some insight into the composition of that song.
Oh, that particular song? Well, that was actually kind of a reworking of the song Minority, because it's kind of like, although Minority is just 16 bars, that one has a bridge. And I was just messing around with that and kind of playing in some different keys. And then I was just kind of messing around with, instead of going, you know, the one minor chord to a 2-5, just doing the tritone. So it was, you know, the tritone 2-5 back to the minor, and then a half step, and then it kind of moves down like Minority. It just kind of came from like just basic, you know, riff, and then the little counter line. I don't know. It was kind of a blowing tune. Like I was just kind of messing around with the tune in that key. And I don't really remember how I came up with the tune. I just kind of put it together. And the thing about composing, and, you know, and then there's composing for jazz, where tune you want to play, is kind of figuring out, like, and this I learned a lot from checking out, you know, great composers like Monk and Horace Silver. Like, the tune always has just like one point, and you just make a little point, and then that's enough in a way. You know, you can go off and deviate to some spots, but things have to kind of, it's about the structure of it. And if you're going to write a tune that people have to improvise on, it's important that it's fun to play, and it's not just like, you know, something that people are struggling with. And, you know, like, the point is like a tune that's kind of deceptively easy, but the basic form and the basic harmonic movement is relatively straight ahead and straightforward and logical. It gives people a lot more freedom to be, you know, to be themselves and to do something with it and to just have fun. So I was trying to write some easy tunes, not easy, but simple tunes that were kind of basic structures. You know, this is like 2 A's, and then I wrote a B section, a bridge with some suspended chords and some movement and everything, and then the last A is A-A-B-A form. So just experimenting with some traditional forms, just so that people got into the improvising part and blowing, they could have some fun. And it would be cool for me to play the song with different people to see how they played it differently, you know. And that's the thing about a jazz tune, especially if you think about Monk or Horace Silver. The composition always retains its personality and its kind of essence. At the same time, people can add their thing to it. So it's hard to try to find that balance where you're not writing too much, but it's not. There's got to be something there, some hook that you're actually putting pieces together and then making a composition. And then, but at the root of it, it's just got to be like not complicated, you know. So that was kind of one of those tunes, trying to write it.
So is that a kind of tune where Larry Goldings and Bill Stewart will come in and like you might not write out all the hits you want them to play, and they will just decide what they want to do?
I read out very few hits, especially for Bill, because if it's supposed to be there, he'll put it there. Like that's kind of how I feel about him.
Yeah.
The counter line, the bass line, there's like actually in the first couple bars of the tune that was written. I mean, I just came up with little parts like, okay, the bass can come down from F, and that'll be cool because I think I was writing it to play with Larry, and then he had two parts he could make, and then against my melody. But then it's just some written stuff like for the first 4 bars. Then it's just 2 5s, you know, so he could do his thing and feel like, oh, down the chart, it's just, you know, it's just this. I can do something with this. And I would write nothing but G minor, C7, F minor, B flat 7, E flat minor, A flat 7. This part I wanted to be specific, G minor, A minor, B flat minor, E flat 7, back to D minor. So, of course, Bill just, because that was the melody, was the little anticipation. So, again, it's like, if the hit is kind of supposed to be there, a good musician will put it there, and it will be like, you didn't even need to write that. It's obvious, you know. So that was, but those guys will add stuff, you know, and put things in that will come about spontaneously, and then from that time on, when we play the song, it'll kind of just be there, and maybe even in a different way, but it becomes part of the arrangement. So just everyone's always trying to add little things and trying to think like an arranger in a way, that you're kind of putting things there that are surprises, but you know, that fit and have some function to the music.
Yeah. Well, my last question is kind of guitar nerd question, and 2 aspects of your playing that I like a lot is you solo with chords so well, and then also you play outside really organically. And I was wondering if you could maybe tell some guitar players or musicians in general how they might develop that in their own playing.
Well, with chords, I mean, that's just that I'm really trying to work on that. And the thing that I find that makes that work is just finding phrases rhythmically, but also melodically, that you can harmonize. You know what I mean? And it kind of becomes about the sound of that note on top, but with a voicing. And so after a while, the voicings start to affect the choice of the note on top, although it should really come from the other way around. Like I'm hearing a melody and I can harmonize that, you know, by putting a chord underneath it. But it goes back and forth. But really it's about, you know, thinking about rhythmic things and to learn how to phrase your chords like you would phrase single notes. But again, because you have to play chords, just kind of play simpler ideas that you can harmonize. Mm-hmm. So it's really about coming from the melodic note and then just trying to find some density, put some density behind that. You know, like a lot of the inspiration, of course, there's guitar players that play great chord solos like Wes. But I think the thing that, you know, it was his touch and the way he phrased his chords and the sound he got out of the chords, which was so amazing. I mean, the voicings are great too, but it was just about, he was really feeling like, you know, like a saxophone section. And I think that was maybe behind his conception as opposed to like, you know, just hear some guitar chords. He was really trying to be like a section. And that was an inspiration to me too. I used to listen to Duke Ellington and things like, wow, I can't get those voicings on the guitar, but I can try to approximate that. And the feeling of, you know, sometimes the chords can work. They don't necessarily have to sound perfect if you do them slowly, but if you do them fast, the mysteriousness of it helps, you know. So, but again, it's like if something is not fast, but I mean just moving quickly, as opposed to like strumming out each voicing, it becomes like the sound of guys phrasing together. And you would write, if you were a genius like Billy Strayhorn or Ellington, you would write it so that the guys' parts were cool, as opposed to like every chord sounding perfect. You know what I mean? That you can hear the parts are inside. So that was, I think, that the genius of the West. Jim Hall and guys, that they're really kind of thinking about the inner voices and kind of like how, you know, how you can just kind of flesh out a melodic fragment. And so just okay, if I had to put some chords to this, how would I do it? What voicings sound the best, not individually, but chord to chord, like moving, like thinking about, oh, that sounds good because of what I'm doing on the G and D string is kind of, holds its own weight. So I think for guitar players, they're very geared towards like, what's the chord with that note on top? And sometimes you have to look beyond that to find like something that sounds a little like off kilter in a good way. The other part of your question was about
outside playing, and maybe some sort of concept that somebody could work on to get that happening a little more naturally.
I always, learning, when I was trying to learn to play and trying, as I still am, but learning like the basic kind of inside language, I would always be kind of fascinated by outside stuff because I really couldn't hear the inside stuff that well. That's why the outside stuff confused me also. So I think it's really, as my ears get a little more solid in terms of really hearing against a bass note, a root, and you have a quality, maybe it's major or minor, and then just listening for the intervals to really hear, what notes work together, and get outside from that way of terms of like, what notes am I trying to lean on against this tonic sound, as opposed to like, here's the scale, and I can move the scale up a half step, and that'll be out. It's more just like dealing with the diatonic sounds and then the tensions in the diatonic, and then making more tensions by adding all the notes, the tensions of the tensions, like thinking of, like a Dorian scale, minor, right? So it's a minor scale. You have the natural sixth and the natural seventh. But then if you start to think of other notes that you wouldn't play if you're thinking Dorian scale, now I have to take it out. How do you take it out? It's really just finding the notes in between, the fifth and the sixth, that note in there. Like use some other tensions that might get you to the tension of the sixth, or the flat nine to the nine. So the outside playing is really just more of, I'm working on it, and I don't consider myself an outside player. I'm really trying to play inside most of the time and connect the chords. But if anything's outside, it's just from looking at another way into the sounds against the chord. You know what I mean? If that's any sense.
Well, and it's interesting because it's almost like you have the same answer to both of those questions, which is melody. Right? You need to be melodic. If you're going to solo with chords, you need to be melodic. If you're going to play outside, you need to be melodic.
You just kind of have to hear what you play. And it's just like the more I play, the more I realize it's a language. So it's just about being fluent in the language, knowing more words, but not necessarily knowing more words. It's more about really getting inside the balance of how you phrase, how you talk, and what are you saying. Is it nonsense, or what's the difference between just saying some words and an idea? So I think musicians actually play this way sometimes. They're like, here are some notes from this chord. I'm going to throw at the chord right as it's going by. And there's another chord, and so I'm going to throw some notes at that chord. But that's just kind of like someone saying, okay, speak some Spanish. Okay, but the point is, if I really can speak Spanish, I can articulate my thought in Spanish. And the point is, Spanish has a certain, just like English, it's like spoken many different ways in many different places, and it's like, it's too general. It's like saying, language, jazz, or play off the sound of a certain chord. Like, it has to be more specific. It has to be an idea, So what makes it something that's, okay, the idea of this phrase is, the flat six into the sixth and the flat nine into the nine, make something out of that. That's an improviser's job, is to take the smallest thing and to be able to whip it up into something, and make it like, I'm going to use what I have. And the fewer notes I give myself to use, the more creative I have to be with those notes. So it's like I say, it's be specific about how you mix your tones. Be specific about how you mix your vowels and your consonants, and that's what kind of mastery of a language is, and just spitting it out there with ease and confidence. That's the hard thing. So the more I realize playing, it's just a language. The guys that I love, they just talk. They just play some stuff, and you hear ideas. And the deepest thing to go into ourselves and be like, what are we just referencing? What is just like what I heard some other cool people say? Or what is an original thought where I've really thought about what these people have written or said or played and like internalize it. Now I'm working on my way of expressing it. You know, that's the ultimate challenge with music. It's like you can improvise. So really you don't have to copy anybody. No one's saying play jazz. They're saying, here, play Stella by Starlight, you know. So that can be, if jazz means I have to play these licks and those licks, then you're not really exhibiting or taking advantage of the freedom you can have by saying, I can play what I want to play. But the thing is, when you can play what you want to play and you have this freedom, it really means that you should know as much about Stella by Starlight as possible so that the things you're saying have a connection to the song and to how music works, as opposed to here's some notes that I can play. You know, free to do that, but the point is like, how do I connect the harmonies of this tune? How do I understand how this form works? That's another thing I'm realizing. Jazz education is taught like we throw things at people they can play, as opposed to really stressing you got to know forms. You have to really get inside the forms of tunes and feel how they work. You know, feel the tension of the different sections. Where does the bridge go? What happens when the bridge? How do I make something out of that event? You know, and so that way, really trying to think about the music that we're playing, the songs, whatever they are, if it's Monk or George Gershwin, but how to really get inside what it's already giving you, which is like this beautiful little story, you know. So, anyway.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Tell us, Peter, what were some of the first things that lit a spark with you and made you want to be a musician or even specifically a jazz guitarist?
Well, I always loved music from when I was really little, and I remember like being a certain age, I guess around 8 or so, when kind of ragtime had a little thing in the mid-'70s. Everybody was playing Scott Joplin, The Entertainer.
The Entertainer.
I love that music, and I love, I remember having the soundtrack to the movie The Sting, which was, kind of brought that back again, and really getting into Scott Joplin and wanting to play ragtime on the piano. I was like 9 years old because I just love the sound of that music. And I played piano for a little while, and I mean, there's no prodigy at all, just taking piano lessons and trying to learn some music and having fun. I remember improvising and enjoying kind of improvising on the piano and getting into different kind of music. My parents listened to the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel. They had a couple classical records. They had a couple jazz records. They had a Dizzy Gillespie big band record, which I remember loving because the scatting was really great, and I just loved the sound. And there was a Mingus record that they had too, Charles Mingus record from the 70s, with Don Pullen and George Adams and Jack Walrath, that group called Changes. They had Changes 1 and Changes 2, and I listened to those Mingus records. I'm like, wow, jazz is really cool. But I loved all kinds of music, and then I got into the guitar because I heard some people in my school playing, and just you hear rock and roll and stuff, and Led Zeppelin and Cream, and then you hear about the blues when you read about Led Zeppelin and Cream. Eric Clapton stole from the Cats, so you start getting into B.B. King, and of course Jimi Hendrix was like that was like the mind-blowing thing. And from Jimi Hendrix, it takes you back to Buddy Guy and Albert King and B.B. King and Freddie King and Albert Collins and all those. And I really checked out that, and I was into the guitar. And then I heard jazz just because I was hearing like, who's Charlie Christian? Who's Django Reinhardt? Who are these people? Who's Joe Pass? Who are these guys that people talk about? And Wes Montgomery. And I remember getting a bunch of jazz records and just saying, it was actually the first really jazz guitar record I remember hearing was Smoking at the Half Note. It was Wes Montgomery with Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, and Jimmy Cobb. It was most of that record, maybe that record, and then there were 2 tunes at the end of it with Jimmy Smith and Grady Tate and Ray Barretto. And so there was like mostly quartet and a couple of organ trio or organ group songs. And when I heard Wes, I was like, wow, I know he's playing the blues, but I don't know what the other notes are. Like, what is all that? Like, what is it was like hearing another language. And I just was like, I got to figure out what they're doing. I have to figure out what they're doing. Of course, hearing about jazz guitar led me to jazz, the bigger world of jazz. You know, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, back to Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins and Roy Eldridge and Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington and Fats Waller, and just checking out the history of jazz and just trying to get into it all. You know?
That's so great that, you know, some of your first jazz records had Jimmy Cobb on it, and then, you know, when you did your first date as a leader, he was the drummer.
It wasn't lost on us, but we, you know, but he was just like, yeah, just a legend, of course, but he was like, he'll play with us, you know, so we had to do it. We didn't know anyone who had that kind of, that feeling, and it just made, wow, he makes us sound good, you know, like how does he do that? Like, we have to be around it as much as possible. But yeah, Cobb was on so many records that I remember. There was one where I first heard Kenny Burrell, and I think first heard Coltrane too, was on those dates with Tommy Flanagan, Paul Chambers, and Cobb, where they do Freight Train. Some of them are quintet. And then there's another side, with a few tunes with a sextet with Idris Suleiman and Coltrane and Kenny Burrell. And that's Louis Hayes on drums. But the first 5 tunes or 6 tunes on the record that I had, remember I had it on a cassette because I taped it for my friend who had the double record, so it was on one 90-minute cassette. But Kenny Burrell and Coltrane blew my mind. That, you know, that's Jimmy Cobb. So many, I mean, and the Miles Davis. I remember hearing Carnegie Hall and Live at the Black Hawk and Jazz at the Plaza was one I got early on too. It's incredible. And man, I mean, Cobb there are so many records. Kenny Dorham, Blue Spring, Bobby Timmons records. I mean, just so many incredible things.
Oh, it's great stuff. Hey, we want to play a track of the trio with you and Larry Goldings and Bill Stewart. We want to play one of your compositions, Dragonfly.
Okay.
And this is from a DVD that came out around 2005, Peter Bernstein Live at Smoke DVD. Now, that same trio has been under Larry Golding's name. And I remember the first record I heard was Whatever It Takes, which was probably like the 3rd record with that group.
His first record that he got on Warner Brothers.
Right. That was the first one I heard. It's like, well, this is
We did a couple records as a trio before that for a German label.
Okay.
And then Warner Brothers came along. That was like 94, I guess. So we started recording in 1990. We did a couple of records, before that, before 90.
So those were under his name, and then we were checking that, and then around 97, early 98, you released Earth Tones, and I was like, well, wait, it's the same group. And then the Bill Stewart VHS came out, Modern Drummer, you know, Bill Stewart and his group. And it was that same trio. And I always wanted to ask, because we just figured whoever had the gig, you know, that's the group, and whoever had the gig, it'd be their name on it. But I always wondered. We never really knew, like, whose group it was, because it always felt when we got together that it was just a cooperative, and we would all that was just always our dynamic, you know. My record date for Crisscross was like, okay, it's my date. You guys do it. We did some of my tunes. We did one of Larry's tunes on that one too. So we just were playing the stuff that we would play on gigs, and then because it was my date, I brought in a couple extra tunes, which we got together, and then Larry got the Warner Brothers, which is a little different kind of situation because they wanted to put him with different people, but they still let us play a few trio tunes, and we were his group. But he had with Warner Brothers, they had some power. So like, hey, let's do it. Yeah, go Larry. Let's see where that takes us. And then we got to record for Palmetto, and those were under Larry's name, but it was always democratic thing. And then we started doing some tours years ago. The past really 5 or 6 years, we've been playing more than we ever have. We've just been kind of lifting it as the 3 names, as a cooperative, you know, and just that's kind of our thing, you know. We're a group, you know, and that's I've noticed the last couple of records have all 3 names listed, which we
just kind of said, no one's the leader. It didn't, you know, necessarily feel right to not just say, hey, you know, it's a triangle. It's cool. It's
nice.
Even, you know.
And let's hear Dragonfly. Some of the people checking this out may not be as familiar with your stuff, so we thought we'd play a track. So this is Dragonfly from Live at Smoke, Peter Bernstein. Nice, nice. Yeah, we had to wait for the smoke on the water quote before we got out of that track.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. As you said before, no reaction. Yeah.
It's flat effect.
Yeah, I guess. Well, just watching that, it's boy, my head is down the whole time. I'm really not, even aware I'm on a gig. It looks like you gotta project a little bit. I hope I'm getting a little bit better at that in my older age, slightly. But yeah, we're just focused on playing. It's funny, but no, those guys look young. We all look young. It's incredible.
Well, that group just functions so well as, it's like three persons, but one unit, and that seems to be the focus, just maybe you guys are all focused on that.
Well, it's just always been fun to play together, and everyone kind of had a little spot that they fell into. I mean, it's just something about that triumvirate of guitar, organ, and drums. There's a space there for everyone, and I mean, in terms of it sounding like a group, I have to say that every time I've heard Bill Stewart play with any group, he made it sound as much like a group as it possibly could. And Larry has the same effect when I see him play with a group. And so it's just like, I think it's those guys. They play really well together. So for me, just to come in, it's like comp a little bit and, play. I get to play the melodies in most cases, and it's just like it's already so together and open with those guys already that I don't really, it's just I could just find a little spot, and sonically, both those guys have such great control of their sounds that it's really helped me over the years really try to focus on my sound and just like be consistent and be, just to blend, but it's these guys they're amazing musicians, and it's just been like amazing to look back and say, wow, we started playing together 30 years ago, and it's like we still get to do it, so it's really couldn't be luckier.
It's been a really, I think it's had a big influence, on the jazz scenes around the country. I know it has in this region, and it helped get the Oregon jazz thing going again, and certainly Dr. Lonnie Smith, and we can name a whole bunch of people, but that group really, that Warner Brothers pushed that record, and I think it really had a big effect.
Well, I mean, it was part of a time when the instrument came back. I mean, Joey DeFrancesco had a lot to do with that. He was the first guy that really got major label support. This was 1990, so a bit before, and he, brought the instrument back in a way, and people started playing it. And as a guitar player, I was, just lucky to get to play with, first with Lonnie Smith, with Lou Donaldson, and that was my first recording date was with them, and some of my first experiences playing on the road in Europe was with Lou and Lonnie. So,
woo!
I was very lucky to have that. And then I got through Crisscross Records. The first Crisscross record I did was with Brian Lynch, great trumpet player from Milwaukee. And at the time, basically until, I don't know, around the late 90s, I think, Melvin Ryan lived in Milwaukee. So he was a mentor to Brian Lynch and David Hazeltine and Mark Davis and all these guys that are out there, Gerald Cannon, all these guys that played from Milwaukee all knew Melvin because he lived there. Melvin Ryan, the great organist who played with the Wests. So through thanks to Brian Lynch, who got me on a record date with Crisscross as a sideman, Melvin happened to be on the record date, and Kenny Washington. So Jerry Teakins, to his credit, knew who Melvin Ryan was and said, you guys should come back tomorrow and make Melvin, you want to come back and make a record tomorrow as leader. You can use these guys, me and Kenny were already there. So that's how I fell into playing with Melvin Ryan. So, and as a young guy, just realizing like, yeah, this organ thing is cool for a guitar because we have a real space and a role to fill, but it was so great that I got to play with such varied personalities, right from the beginning. Lonnie and Melvin couldn't be more different in terms of their approach to the instrument and just in every way. And then my old buddy Larry was learning how he used to play keyboard at first. He didn't had to learn, about the Hammond because he never saw Hammond before. But he was listening to the records and had a great bass line. So we used to play at Augie's, and he had a great bass, like a Moog thing for the bass, and he had a Korg for the top, and he could always make great sounds out of any keyboard. But of course, when we got on the real organ, he learned how to really control the sounds and really play his incredible textures and incredible orchestrational kind of things. So he was really evolving in terms of just getting his own kind of sounds, and so that helped our group. But again, as I'm saying, I got to play with very different personalities and temperaments on the organ. So the organ wasn't just like playing with an organ; it was like totally the experience playing with these different cats. And then Mike LeDon, around the mid-90s, 95, 96, Mike LeDon got really back into the organ, and because he's a great piano player, but he started really checking out organ and doing gigs. And then around 2000, we started having a steady gig at Smoke. So I've been lucky to play with a lot of organ players for extended period of time.
Yeah, that Tuesday night Smoke gig that's been going a long time.
Been going since Smoke kind of started in 2000. So yeah, it's really been a good thing. We just did here with a big band, the quartet with LeDon and Farnsworth and Eric Alexander with Dennis McCrell wrote these charts and put together an incredible big band. It's going to come out pretty soon. So LeDon wanted to do the organ with big band things. It's really
that'll be hip.
We recorded it, it basically in late February, so it was right before everything, went crazy, and it was quite an experience, But Dennis McCrell wrote great charts, and he got Faddis, and the trumpet section was like smoking, and Steve Wilson and great guys like on a great band, great big band. Just read it. We had one rehearsal. These guys just played. It was incredible. So that's fun.
I have one more question about the trio. Did you guys I'm always disappointed when the releases don't come out on vinyl. Does anybody ever push to put those out on vinyl? Do other vinyl nerds bug you about that?
I haven't heard that much. We did one record that we did on a German label. I think the second one, called Light Blue, that came out on a record. But I don't know I'm sure it went out of print again. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's certain labels that do that, and it's kind of really for that market, for that kind of audiophile.
Right.
But yeah, jazz doesn't sell that many records anyway, so people want to have records instead of just an MP3 or something, or CDs are obsolete, so maybe records will come back. I don't know. It's definitely, yeah, it's a different experience. But I don't even have a record player, so it's just like few people have them. But you can definitely feel the difference in the complexity of like it's just a different thing than hearing digital.
Yeah, I would like to hear some of those. Well, even the recent records. I keep hoping when you guys put out a new record. Well, surely, because people are issuing more vinyl now. I keep thinking when a new release comes out, surely they'll put Toy Tunes on vinyl.
Well, that label's kind of done now. Pirouette is done, so it would have to be resurrected from So we were supposed to make another record in April. After a bunch of gigs that got canceled, everything got canceled. But we're hoping to do that next year and make a record for Smoke Sessions label. And they have done some vinyl, not a lot. They did like a sampler that was a vinyl thing. So I don't know. They're flexible. That's what they can sell. That's what people want. I'm sure they'll find a way to do it. We'll see.
We've talked a little bit earlier about your dear friend Jimmy Cobb, who we lost earlier this week, and we've got a track we want to play. This is from November of 2019. It's with you on guitar, George Cable's on drums, John Weber on bass, and the great Jimmy Cobb on drums. Can you tell us anything about this gig at the Nash or about the recording?
The Nash is this great club in Phoenix, which is really the performance space for I'm not sure the name of it's a jazz society that has been around the Phoenix area for quite some time. And when Louis Nash moved back to the area, he moved back. He's from Phoenix, and he moved back. It was around the time they got this space, and I think they got him involved, and they decided to call the place the Nash. So it's he doesn't run the club, but it's in his name, and he was very active in bringing Jimmy out, and they gave him like a Lifetime Achievement Award. And this was right after Thanksgiving of last year, so it was just really a few months ago. And Jimmy he turned 91 in January, so it was a few months shy of his 91st birthday. And we just had one night to play a couple sets there, and the next day we did a workshop for some of the students at ASU, Arizona State University, which is connected to the space. And it was just it's a great crowd they have there. They've cultivated a jazz audience, and people really knew who they were listening to, and it was really fun. A lot of love in the room, and Louis Nash is really just great in helping to keep that place going. But it was one of Jimmy's last performances. We played in Baltimore a few months later, in the middle of January, and those were his last gigs. But I was really glad when I heard that the Nash was able to preserve some of the night there. So yeah. He's 90
Excellent.
Years old. And
well, let's let our good friend Jim Lauer let this roll, and we're gonna hear this as he gets it going. I just want to send a shout out to Herschel McWilliams and Live Jazz KC and Jim Lauer helping us out with the stuff tonight, with the audio and the video. I was listening on my phone there, man. That just was so swinging.
Oh wow, yeah. But you were able to listen to it through the. Oh, I see. Because I see. Okay, yeah.
I should have given that tip. I figured that out on the Dragonfly.
See, I see. I figured I gotta listen to that. Just seeing him was just like, oh man. Yeah, yeah. It was something. Just that beat and the way he, stayed at the time and the way, it made the music feel and his sound had a presence and a real and a weight to it, but it never covered up the other instruments. It made the other instruments sound better. Every bass player I ever played with Cobb always sounded their best with Cobb. Like it's something he just, beautiful.
Yeah, and that's that indescribable thing of there's some musicians who just lift everybody up, that they're with.
That's true. That's true.
We had a question that came in from Chris Hazelton, organ player, friend of mine.
I remember him, of course.
Yeah.
Great musician. Yeah.
Yeah. And he mentioned just all the great organists you've played with over the years and how, you fit in with them and you might play pretty differently because you're fitting into a different situation, but you always sound like yourself. And he was just sort of asking about, your approach in doing that and working with all those different organ players and what you might do differently or the same or.
Well, I would just try to follow where they were going, and blend and just kind of try to have a conversation and enjoy the conversation. Of course, I would try to blend in with the way they play the instrument sonically, like, as best I could. But I kind of would just try to keep my sound as focused as possible. I don't know. It's like, as I was talking about before, it's like part of the maturing process, the maturation process of just kind of figuring out, who you are kind of, and doing that, but having it be as flexible as possible. That's what I always had some great role models, this great teacher, Ted Dunbar, told me you kind of want to play the same with everybody, but you want to fit with everybody. So that's the secret. If you can, I think, I mean, I'm really working on it, but I think the way in is through the material that you're playing. The better you know the song, the better you are, more familiar you are with the form of whatever you're playing, then you can really have a conversation and hold up your end of the conversation, So while playing the same tune with Lonnie or with Melvin Ryan or Larry Goldings would be a totally different experience. But really for me, what I contribute is about, well, how well do I know the song? If I know it well, I could play it this way with Dr. Lonnie because he's going to do this with it. And if I really know the song, I can play it the way Melvin might play, which is a whole different. But it really comes down to me, knowing what I want to, knowing where I want to go with the song, with the form, with whatever you're playing, having a flow through it, But just respond to, what they're doing. But the organ has a million stops. You can change the sound. I don't really change my sound that much. I'm just trying to be there with wherever it's going, and yeah, it's really more about the person than about the instrument. In the hands of those masters like Lonnie and Melvin Ryan, like the instrument doesn't even exist. It's just them. There's their imagination. So that's the fun of it. It's just the personalities involved, and beat is giant. You can't. How do you propel? How do you get that? You just have to play enough quarter notes and have a concept about it and tap into this thing, that makes you like expand your beat, and that's where the flexibility and strength comes in. I think to have a big beat, wide beat.
It because I spent a lot of time working with the metronome and playing drums with the metronome and trying to make the metronome disappear, and I think all that stuff helps. But in the end, it's the people I play with that that feels the best, and then trying to play with them as much as I can, like Todd Strait,
With people, and you have to learn how to play with people. It's a tricky thing, because you do need that strength, but at the same time, you want it to be, in the moment. And the moment is what we're making together, not just me, So you're called on to have those two things, this, the flexibility and the strength,
Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's just been an honor to be able to, talk to you and hear your perspective on things.
Well, thanks. I mean, I really appreciate what you guys are doing and what Herschel's doing and Jim too. Just putting the music out there for people that are interested in it, and because that's the way it's going to survive through this. Is it's going to go on as long as it goes on. But I really think that the people that care about this music will keep it alive. And in a way, I think that my theory to keep optimistic about it is that jazz is really too small to fail, because it's not really counting on billions of dollars that it's not going to get now. It never had that in the first place. It was hanging on by the thread, and people will preserve these threads because they're precious, and to the people that care about them, I think they'll be, because people will need them more than ever when it's able to happen again. People will need an experience of we can get close enough to be, and just slowly we'll come back, and the good thing about music that's made in that kind of, non-distance way, will be needed, because everyone will just only watch people on a computer screen for months, and God forbid, years. It's not gonna. I mean, it's gonna be a cherished thing again, and I hope. That's what we're hoping for. So that's all we have.
Well, just hearing you talk about playing made me want to do a gig, man. Got me inspired.
Thanks, man. We all miss it for sure.
Well, thanks to you. Thanks to Brian Baggett. Thanks to Herschel McWilliams and Jim Lauer. Thanks to Live Jazz KC. Like their stuff on Facebook. Go check out some Peter Bernstein YouTube videos. Check them out on Spotify. Master classes. You got a lot of stuff out there, and it's all good.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, hope to cross paths when that's possible.
Yeah, man. And you've got some family. Was it your wife's parents are around the Kansas City area?
Yeah, her dad, and she has some aunts and uncles out in Richmond, Missouri.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you'll make it to town again.
I hope so.
And I get to New York every once in a while. It's been a while, so.
Let me know. I'll be here.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Man, thanks, Brian.
Cool, guys. Yeah, take care.